and welcome to the Special Needs Sibling Podcast, where we talk about what life is really like as a sibling to someone with special needs. I'm your host, Charlene, and today our guest is Suyapa. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
We'll hop right into it. Can you lay out your family structure for us? Like you, your siblings, kind of like age difference between you guys, things like that.
Yeah, so I'm the eldest of three. I have an adopted brother who's the middle child. He's in his early 30s. And I have a younger sister who is 28. So it's just three of us. Yeah.
So can you please describe your sibling's disability?
Yeah, so my brother, he has bipolar and also struggles with substance use. My sister has intellectual disability. I guess diagnoses-wise specifically, it's called Opitz syndrome. I think doctors felt like that was like the closest diagnosis, but it doesn't 100% fit. So she's kind of, I don't know, a unique case, I guess.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's different. 'Cause there's some I've come across some other sibs where that's also similar. Where like some of them, it's like a very unique subset within the larger disability. But like there are other. Have you met other families that have like kids or siblings with the same type of disability she has?
I have not, no. Mm. I was reading up on it a little bit a while ago when I first like found out or heard about it, and it says it's predominantly like mostly diagnosed with boys, so that was interesting. Um,
Oh,
and yeah,
fascinating. Yeah.
so there were some similarities, I guess, as far as like born with a cleft lip and palate, like
Mm-hmm.
heart murmur issues, like stuff like that she does have.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so but there are some things that don't quite fit either. So, but it's the closest thing, I guess.
Yeah, like I get, yeah, for the purposes of like you trying to explain it to somebody, then that's your best hope is to kind of like at least get them a ballpark. Yeah, yeah. No, that's it's a very real struggle. Like just it's already hard even for me, right? I have the easy out like, oh, my sister has autism, but like it's interesting cuz it's a very different issue because autism, is a fairly quote unquote popular, like
And it's
everyone.
a broad spectrum
It
too, though.
is. It's so
Yeah.
different, right? Like the people, and I remember even growing up when in schools and stuff, even kids in her class that were diagnosed, that like there's some traits that are pretty everyone has, or 98% of that people have those specific traits when they're diagnosed with autism, but there's just other personality things that are just like it's her personality with a spin. It's not that all people on the spectrum have
That
that. And I
same
think,
thing, yeah.
yeah, so it's I think that's been interesting. As the older I've gotten, the more I realize and that like her personality is like most of it is her. It's just that she has to communicate through the lens of someone that has autism, but for the most part a lot of her personality is still there. But you have to be willing to, kind of get through the first fence to be
Layer.
able to then. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we like to keep it pretty open forum on the podcast. So, is there anything, any topic, questions, anything you would like to talk about? That's just sib stuff, whatever that may be.
Yeah, I feel like the first thing that comes to mind for me that I kind of wanted to dive into or discuss is like I think the being the eldest and also growing up in like a Latinx household and the
Yeah.
effects of that because culturally as it is like the eldest Latina daughter typically takes on more of a motherly caregiver role already, so it's been interesting to kind of maybe, I guess, take a step back and see how the effects of that on me because not only am I the eldest, but I have two siblings that have um, different, needs and require different type of um, attention, I guess you could say. So, and I think that it adds even more pressure or responsibility to like not mess up.
Oh, that is, yeah. That hits to my core, like the whole, yeah. Oh no, I'm so excited to talk about that. That's something, yeah, because I'm the oldest, and then for me, like for my family, we're Chinese, and so it's not going to be the same exact things, but there I think there's a good amount of overlap in terms of
Yeah,
expectations of being the oldest, and then like cult, and then like societal expectations, and then doing well, and yeah, there's a
so
layer
many layers.
of, yeah, there's so many layers of, we want this for you to be better than everything else, but then like it's not, yeah, it's like your child is the mantle, but we can't be, but you are, but like what else do you do? Yeah, it's so hard to
It is.
balance.
It's a lot of like pressure and responsibility and like really high expectations, I think, that is placed on us. And especially too, like coming from like immigrant parents, like there's also this added layer of like just like you said, like we want you to do better or be better, right? And so it's just like, okay, cool, but
Yeah, and it's so interesting. So my parents were born in the US. But even that being said, like it's really interesting because even though, from my perspective, even though they were born here, they're like certain things they've acclimated to in terms of like being more American, and there's other attributes that they're still pretty like, they still hold
those
cultural
traditional.
expectations, right? And it's this thing where it's like not it, and I think the harsh part is like no one says those out loud, right? You feel
Right.
all of the
Yes.
things. Like when you're at
Indirect.
family dinners, you're like, oh man, like I guess I have to like step it up because the way everyone talks about you in
Right.
front of you, but
Exactly.
to other people, and it's right, like you're sitting right there, but like, oh, but my daughter does this, and you're like, I don't.
You're
I'm
like,
gonna
stop it.
sit.
Stop telling them these things. Yeah. No,
Exactly.
I
You're like,
totally relate to
I,
that.
yeah, right. And I think the most interesting thing that I've been like talking to with my therapist, like through kind of like that a particular lens, right, is, or something that I've realized in that compounds with that, is that siblings by themselves already have that built like just in your subconscious. So it sucks because then it's like, oh, I'm a sibling, plus I'm the oldest, plus I have all these cultural expectations that everyone has decided that I'm going to represent them. And you go,
Plus societal, right? Like, yeah.
yeah, and it's so like, I don't think, it's not until like fairly recently that I realized like, wow, like that is not meant for any child to bear. And that's what's crazy, right? It's not like, oh, you turned 18 and then you had these expectations put on you, right? Like, oh, like you got your driver's license, now you have to do stuff. It's like you're 6 and they go, oh, you're gonna be the oldest and do all the things and make all the money, and you've
Right.
redeemed everything, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
so not meant to be on children, especially for sibs, because it's so.
I don't know if you also feel this or experience this because I also, uh, like, have experience where, like, because I'm not only because I'm the oldest, but I'm the only, I guess you could say, child out of the 3 that can give my parents, like, the traditional, like,
Ah, yeah.
life, so to
Yep.
speak,
Yeah. Yep.
or like a typical, like,
Yes,
life.
the quote unquote normal
Yeah,
experience. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
and so it's like marriage, kids, like, like all these things, like career and education, and like the list goes on and on and on. It's like, what if I don't want any of those things? Or what if like I like only want this but not that? And I think growing up, I didn't know I had a choice.
Oh, 100% I agree with that. Yeah. I felt like my trajectory was what once I picked it, it was like, oh, you're just going to keep going, regardless of like if it went well or not. It was just kind of, oh, you're on this path to whatever it was, and I think I felt I felt like growing up, I didn't have a lot of choices. Not so much in like the career, like the bigger topics you're talking about, but I feel like on a day to day, it was hard for me to make a choice because I struggled between, oh, like my sister is throwing a tantrum, what do I do? Right? And then going, well, I'm upset about something completely unrelated. Like I just had a bad day. Also, so I go, okay, well, do I like be upset about my day or do I go help her, right? And it's and like on paper that sounds like a choice. Like if you were taking a multiple choice test, you would go, "Oh, but you can choose." But I don't think people, especially as the oldest in a household where like, oh, we need to like save face, right? You don't you I'm not going to pick the thing that I want to do. I'm going to pick the thing that makes everything peaceful, right? And make it easy. Exactly. It makes it easier on my parents to say, "Oh, I've taken care of it. Don't worry about it." It said, and then I can feel terrible on the inside because I had a bad day. But it doesn't matter because it needs to be,
Yeah,
yeah, yep,
yeah,
yeah.
because that the sibling, it's hard to explain if unless you, like, you live it, right, or
Yeah, exactly.
experience
That's
it.
why I'm so glad. Like we're so like in this. Like I can like I'm like having all these like visual things when I was little because it's so.
It's real, it's like because, like, the sibling, like, even though, like, I'm the other sibling too, right, and I had, like, a crappy day or whatever, and I also need to be, like, acknowledged or taken care of emotionally or whatever, that there's no space for that in that
Nope,
moment.
absolutely not. Yeah,
Like, that like, the sibling who's having,
yeah,
like, a behavioral,
yeah.
like
Like meltdown or
right, like, that overrides everything else, like, that's where all of the attention and energy and effort, like, goes into that moment.
and it's crazy because the amount of like care that that takes from us as their older sibling, right? There's this the whole thing is like you grow up like that, right? And even then for you like you had because you're 10 years apart from like your youngest, you kind of had a little bit more time versus I'm only 2 years older than my sister, so there was like less time for me just to be me. But even that being said, right? It's this thing where because it's not a ramp up of oh like oh you learn to crawl and then walk and then run. It's not like that. It's like it's almost like this overnight like oh I'm a sibling. I now need to do these things. And I think even I'm pretty sure it's an overdrive in us, especially just for cultural reasons and for being the oldest. I'm pretty sure it's even the next gear up from that. But what I think was which is it's kind of a little disheartening, right? It's like it follows you into like the workplace. Right. So I can't tell you how many jobs I've had where I see other people not doing their job or whatever, right? And I my first instinct is, "Oh, I need to like people please and fix it and make
Gotta
sure
step
they
in and
do
take
their
care of
work."
it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I don't prioritize. I just need to do my job. But it's like, right? And then your whole kind of in your very like when right out of college when you first start working it's all that your whole people pleasing taking care of people when you work and that's not healthy but you don't know it because you grow up
That's all you
just
know.
yeah yeah
Yeah, until you
yeah
start feeling burnt out and irritable and angry, right? And annoyed, and then you're like, okay, what's going on? Yeah, no, I totally relate to that. And honestly, it took many, many, many years for me to like unlearn that, And I think even, it's interesting because I am a therapist and I think it's been influenced by my experience as a sibling. Um, so it's already like innate in me. And then now I'm in a field that like it's essentially doing like similar like things, right? So it was interesting for me to unlearn the passiveness or the people pleasing, and be just more assertive and be more okay with people not liking me.
In the last couple of months, that's been my, because I started a new job recently, and so that's been my thing, is like, I don't, and it's interesting because more so with this job than other ones, because it's kind of this cross of, I'm in my healing journey with my therapist and like internal work, right? So like as that's increasing, then it changes the way I show up at various jobs that I've had and will have, right over that, the like the increase of that healing process. And so it's been interesting to say, like, oh, I show up at work and, like, you don't know anyone when you start a job for the most part anyway. So it's this thing where, oh, like, do I camouflage and fit in? Do I be the opposite and like stand out? And so I think one of the interesting things has been, sometimes I'll call home and be like, man, like, I don't know how to like connect to these people, blah blah. And then I'll ask myself, would I have changed what I did? And what's great about that now is that I wouldn't have changed anything. Go, okay, then like we can move on, because it's just it's a time variable, right? Because the longer you're somewhere, then that's the thing that lets you talk to people, is time, not what you say in the first 5 seconds you meet someone. But I noticed that it's so different than when I was growing up, because growing up I felt like I didn't fit in, right? And it's like kind of all those factors we talked about, right? Being the oldest, being like first, second generation people, right? Like there's all these things. Being a sibling, no one understands that. It doesn't matter who you are, unless if you're a sib. And so I would try all these things to fit in, but every time I would go home, I would be like, oh, I should have just done X, or I should have done Y, or I should have said this to this person, right? And I would always like double back on myself, instead of now go, nope, like, I'm gonna show up this way, and if you don't like me, well, then I guess that's
That's okay.
whatever.
Yeah, yeah. No, 100%. I think even as like a women's society in general already, to have that like expectation to be like passive, I guess you can say, or just say, oh, that's, now I remember what I was gonna say. And so something that I've adopted myself and also encouraged people that I work with who, struggle with similar things um, is the question like, would I, can I sit, like if someone's asking me like, hey, do you mind, uh, I don't know, helping me organize my house? And like, I really don't want to, right? um, but then I feel like this obligation to say yes, right? So it's like asking myself, like, can I sit with the temporary discomfort of saying no versus a long-term resentment of saying yes? And I think that has like really helped me like shift like my decision making, I guess, when someone asks me something that I don't want to do. And now it's like I don't have to like even think that, like, because I've just gotten so used to that and okay with that and build tolerance for that, that like I don't mind saying no when I mean no. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that it was such like a weird thing to tell people no, just because for so long, like, you just say yes to everything, right? Your parents ask you to do something, it doesn't matter if you do or don't want to do it, or siblings or like whatever. And it's yeah, it's like it's okay to say no, but then it feels weird, but then it feels so good. What Once you gotta get over
Yeah,
that,
the
the
little hump.
learning curve, it's like, oh, this is great, because I can do stuff that I want to do, and it's like I feel so
Right.
much better about it. Yeah, no, I was thinking about what was it, like Mulan, like the animated version, the new one. I There's a whole other thing about that, but the original animated, right? Because it's the whole idea about, like, right, because the dad says to her, like, I know my place, you should learn yours, right? And obviously there's evolution after that, like, go watch Mulan if you haven't, because I'd be surprised. But like, not you,
Yeah.
but just whoever's listening to it. But
Yeah.
it's this thing, right, where it's, yeah, there's so many cultural expectations and like from society, right? And that's what's interesting too. It's like there's inside your own family there's a certain set of like rules and expectations, whatever, right? And then you have the outside society that then looks at your family, and it's so interesting, right? Because like for yeah, I feel like to save face, I think is like that applies to a lot of people, but like more so in like, non-American culture, right? Like when you have like culture, like different, like I'm sure like you probably have that, like I have that, right? Where it's this thing of saving face is already like an issue without the disability part, but now like we're compounding disability into it. So like when you're in public spaces, it's like the worst because you feel, yeah, like I think I feel the most pressure, like, and that's why like I used to hate going on trips with my family because, and hate's a strong word, but it was very uncomfortable unless if I knew we were going somewhere safe. Like I knew we were going somewhere where like people knew us, or like we would be in, like there's no one there or whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah. No,
Because
yeah.
I just like the pressure is too real because it's, oh, we have to operate like our family has our own thing, and then if my sister has a meltdown or something bizarre happens, like you're screwed. It's like, okay, the whole strip is shot.
Everyone's looking. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, as it is, right? I think like if you don't fit like the typical like um uh white American look, that there's already, maybe depending where you live too, right? But I think it adds another layer if you have a
Oh,
sibling
that's
with
true.
a also visible like disability. Like I think when I was little, I was way more like aware, and even sometimes like I would even I'm laughing at my younger self because I would even like look to see if people were looking or staring at her, and then I would stare at them back.
Oh, I wish I was that kid. I was the opposite. I was the like turtle shell, no
Kind of
one look.
hiding.
Yeah, yeah. I was completely like under a blanket. I hated
I
it.
would try to make them feel so uncomfortable. Like, no, screw you. Like, like, how do you like if I'm staring at you? you
No,
know?
yeah, I wish I was that kid all the time. Yeah, like when I look back, I'm like,
And that's the interesting thing too about me is that like whenever it came to my siblings, like I was like uh like I would stand up for them a lot, and I would like fight for them quite a bit. But when it came to myself, it was different.
and it's so crazy, right? Because it's I can't even tell you how many situations that aren't emergencies, right? Like if you're just standing with like a group of 6 people and people go, "Where do you want to eat lunch?" Right? I can't tell you the amount of times that I felt the need to not only make people decide, but I would just pick out of like I just was hungry and I'm like I don't in real time, right? I go, why can't you guys just make a choice? I'm going to help you make it instead, right? And the thing I would do now is just I would say, I'm hungry. I would like to go here. I'm gonna go now. See you there if you want, right? And that's
Yeah,
very
yeah.
it's a different way of asserting it. But the way that I used to do was I would just sit there hungry for 15 minutes watching them debate because I couldn't I wasn't willing to stand up for myself to say I'm starving. Please just like take a place or be able to walk away. And I think that's a whole other skill set that I've had to learn is like I can walk away. Like whether that's for my own good or for the betterment of the people that I'm with, like I can walk away and like we can come back to it. Like it's not I don't need to sit here and listen to this thing that's making me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. No, totally. I think that's part of the learning process too for me as well. I think too just something that I've become more and more aware of recently with my own therapist actually is not just like my family like experiences, but even I think like my family experience definitely set that like foundation. and work experience kind of like uh exasperated what was already there, which is like my tolerance level for chaos.
Oh.
I guess it's not normal compared to the average person. And it's like sounds so obvious, right? But it wasn't.
I'm so happy you said that. I also now feel like it's not straight because I can't tell you like yeah, I would be like I would talk to my husband after and he's like, "Wow, like, he'll like mention or whatever." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's normal." And then he kind of looks at me like, "Oh." And then, but you're still when you're still dating, you kind of just like you don't really say a whole lot at that point, right? But I think the more that we spend time with each other's families, the more I like watch his family and I'm like, "Oh, they're like normal people. They're just like sitting there and they're just sitting there. There's no like here's my laundry list of things to do. Here's my like there's nothing happening." And I went like, wow, this is
Different. Yeah. No, I was like, I mean, like, I kind of knew that I had, but I guess in my mind, I thought, "Oh, it's because of work." Like, I'm already, like, used to and trained, I guess you could say, to, stay calm in chaotic or crisis situations. But I guess I didn't also make the connection of how that plays in my day-to-day life. Um, like like my the reason why this came up too, because she had asked me something of like my a personal relationship of mine, and she was like, "Well, like." I mean, she didn't say in these words, but basically she was like, "Well, you're a therapist and also you have like, knowledge and also you have a brother with these similar issues. Like, how did you not like think that that was problematic?" And I was like, I mean, you know, like, I don't know. I think I was like, wow, like I even have high tolerance for lack of a better way of saying it, like unhealthy people in my life,
oh, right, yeah.
you know?
It's so crazy because it's yeah, like the more that I like it how to I was like I don't even know how to explain this. The more that I like learn about myself and a variety of things, the more I go like my therapist said not something that's like very parallel to what you just said, right? She listed all these things that I had said to her in the past about me growing up and work and whatever. And she lists them all. She goes, that's like really hard. It's not meant for children. And I went, oh yeah, you're right. Like, because the list was so long. Like because right, and I think I had never put those things like in the same list. I always had categorized like, oh, like school stress is school, and then like home stress is home, and then like there's like different all like cultural stuff can is separate, and like my anxiety about what I want to be when I grow up is separate, right? But the thing is, there was this one day where she said all of them like in a sentence, and then I went, oh, and she's like, yeah, like she's like, I'm amazed that you're like still here, and I said, I am too, right? Because when you hear someone else list it out, you just go like, oh, it's not okay.
Yeah, like it kind of you kind of then start to reflect or realize like, oh, that is a lot. You know?
Yeah, and I think like and it makes sense for all the times that I like really just wanted to disappear off the face of the earth, right? And what when that connection happened in my brain, I was like, oh, but that makes sense. Like it makes sense why I felt so crappy about myself for so long was because I had all these burdens that weren't and the hardest part is like especially like from a cultural standpoint, right? They're not our burdens to bear, right? Like what my parents' expectations and what my grandparents expect and what's this, right? Like those aren't my burdens to bear. Like they want that, but that is their, like they need to deal with that. Like I can't fix that for them, but I took it on anyway.
And as a child, you don't know that, right? Like, you just think like, "Okay, it is mine to, like, carry and take and and, like, achieve," you know? And sometimes and not even as a child, like, this like, at least for me, like, it stayed with me for a long time, even to, like, adulthood, you know? It's honestly, I think I would say it's not within the last 5 years of my life that I started to, like, make a lot of these, um, changes, I guess you could say, for myself. And I think part of that too is I think my along with me making these changes, like my parents also are evolving and changing, which has helped so much for my own growth. Because even like my mom even like apologizes to me for things that she can now recognize or
Oh
acknowledge.
wow.
Yeah, which
That's
is huge.
impressive.
I know, and it's huge. And I think that, like, stuff like that and moments like that and they probably don't know this, and then maybe it's something that I should tell them when I see them later today, is that, like, that has helped my growth too, to, like, evolve and heal and grow, and have feel more free to, like, be me and, like, learn more about me and, like, freedom and authenticity in my own authenticity, you know, versus having to, like, stick to this mold that they're trying to like make me into, you know? Um, so there's some sense of liberation with that, you know?
No, that's so exciting. Like I think one of the things I did not realize as I've been like going through my healing journey and process and like with my therapist is that my like the way that my parents raised me, right? This applies to anybody, right? But the way that my parents raised me really affected a lot more than I thought, right? And I'm sure, like, in our particular instances, it's obviously more complicated because of the disability thing. Like, I don't think in a regular, like, American household, like, if you just have, like, you know, two kids and golden retriever, you're not gonna have this, like, dilemma of, I have two kids and one's throwing a tantrum, having a bad day, right? It's not like that, right? And I think, like, it's one of those, you know, they could only do what they could given, you know, the start of the internet, not a lot of, right, there's only so many resources at that time for them to do stuff, but it's I really I think I just didn't know how much I am now as an adult affected by their choices that they made when I was small. And some of them are just kind of sucky. Like it's just right. Like it sucks when there's just times where I'm not gonna get the attention when I had a bad day because my sister's having a like an equal or worse day, and that's it's hard to like celebrate. Oh, like I got an A on a test because oh we want you to do well in school versus oh like you know your sister finished her meal for the first time and didn't run a lap around the house. Like that's a much bigger like milestone for everyone, right? And it's so hard when it's like when you don't get those little wins too. That's also hard because then you're in this boat of oh I need to keep achieving to get the attention because clearly like me getting a gold star on this piece of paper isn't enough. So I'm going to keep pushing to like make more money or work at these, you know, work corporate whatever, like go up the ladder and it's so hard because it's like compounding with the cultural side of it, right? Like that's also like a societal thing like oh like your first generation you're going to exceed all expectations and make all this money and like you know buy you know like do all these great things and it's like well that can be true but also not necessarily for everyone, right? I think there are some people it does work out and they're fine. There's also a lot of people I think that's not true and they want to do other things with their
Yeah.
lives.
No, I appreciate you sharing that because there is a lot of like grief even within our own like experiences, right? Like how we even mentioned earlier, like grief not having like a typical childhood, grief like not being able to have like doing things that like kids our age were doing, Like, I mean, as a kid, I was feeding my sister through a G tube. Like,
Right? Yeah, that's not a typical experience.
exactly, exactly. It's like, or like putting gauze and taking care of her, like, the entry of her G tube and like stuff like that. It's like that's not expected or typical in all family homes. And no one knew outside of my house that that was happening. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and nor like who and why would I like say that to someone like that they don't they
Yeah.
like how are they going to relate to something like that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But
Especially when it's like, yeah, teenagers are mean.
yeah. I mean, I think yeah, that's what produces, I think, a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety,
Mm,
and even trauma,
yeah.
I think, because I mean, I remember even hospitals were very triggering for me. I mean, my sister was in and out of hospitals for a good chunk of like the first few years of her life. I mean, I I want to say my sister has had at least like 10 to 20 like surgeries for different things.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so there was like nights where like my mom would have to be awake 'cause she's staying at the hospital overnight and it was just my dad and I. I mean, there's so much stuff there that like I don't think people realize or recognize how that affects us siblings like growing up in that kind of environment. And so the anxiety and the depression is so real. you
It
know?
is, and but what, like, to your point earlier about your tolerance for chaos, like, I think the tolerance for anxiety is also up the wazoo. Like my tolerance for, like, yeah, the amount of anxiety and stress that I can tolerate and house is not like that is should not be okay. But like I can do it, and it's I didn't even know that how much I was housing until I moved away, like, from all of it, and then went, oh, like my body like actually felt different. Like, I've never, and I didn't know that was possible. But then I go, wait a minute, this is how regular people feel. No one, and then it like started to click because I was like, oh, no wonder when, like, it makes sense when people, and this used to, like, I don't know how I feel about it now, but when I used to hear people say, "Oh, I'm so stressed out," and I was like, "Would you like to?" Right? But they're stressed out about, like, "Oh, I'm like studying for this test," but they would be like, like, drinking Red Bull and staying up
Yeah,
all night,
yeah.
and I'm sitting here like, okay, I mean, I'm concerned about that test too, but like, I have all these,
All
right?
this
But
other stuff,
it's all
yeah,
this
that's
other stuff
happening.
that like you don't.
Yeah, I know that isn't that wild, like, when you think about that? Like, it's even dealing with stress has been yeah, tolerance level for that is different for us for sure. I mean, I was kinda jokingly, but not joking with my doctor. I had my doctor's appointment recently, and I was like I was like, "Yeah, like, I have a really low heart rate. I don't know if that's concerning." She's like, "No." She's like, "That's a good thing." I'm like, "Are you sure?" She's like, yeah, she's like, "Well, you used to be an athlete." I was like, "I mean, in high school and middle school so long ago." And then she's like, "So yeah, it makes sense." And then I'm like, "Or it's trauma, I don't know." And she
That's
just
good.
kinda like awkwardly laughed.
Yeah, she's like, I don't know how to
Which one
respond
is
properly. Yeah,
it?
then pick one. Yeah.
Yeah, like, maybe it's trauma, I don't know.
Oh, that's so funny. And it's definitely something where it's like, I'm very thankful, like, that we can have this conversation, right? But and it's this thing where, like, because really no one understands. Because even if we talk to other sibs, right? But like but like from like an ethnicity standpoint, from an elder standpoint, right? Like, there's just so many more things that, like, you really can't even explain to other people who, and sibs are more understanding, obviously, but like, yeah, but there, I think there's a level of like, it's just so hard. It's like I don't, I would remember like and I think you mentioned this earlier, like who are you gonna tell about like what you did at home and what made you and why you stayed up last night, right? Because it's this thing where, and I remember there was there were some people, and it's crazy because like those people I can remember pretty vividly, because right, because it's like you tell them these things and they kind of give you this like dead eye look where it's like, oh, I don't get it, but and then they don't try, and it's like, I don't. And it's interesting because I think there's one person in particular. This was years ago where I had, it was a happier occasion, but it was something revolved around disability and my sister and environments and stuff. And I remember like, and she wasn't mean or anything. She just kind of didn't get it and wanted to move on. But there's a very clear delineation for me of that point where I go, we're not gonna be good friends anymore, because that is like the core of my being, right? And that's what's I think insane is like, despite all the like trauma and not trauma and the like, growing up with childhood and the anxiety, the stress, and all the things we listed, right? Despite all of those things, whether for good or bad, like at the core, like your sibling self is the thing that drives everything, right? Like how you show up at work, how you interact with your family, how like how you choose to enjoy and take care of yourself. Like the sib self part of that is such a, like, you can't change that. You can change a lot of things, right? You can like fortunately your parents have recognized some things and have apologized. Like they can change, right? You can change your jobs, you can change your friends, whatever, but like you can't change that you're a sib. And it's such like a, like everything has ends up revolving around that, more whether I want it to or not.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, even to the point of like who you like decide to be your life partner, you know?
Yes.
And where you decide, like for me, for example, like I know once my parents can no longer take care of my sister, I'm gonna have her living with me. So I have to also be aware of like where, like I need to make sure I live in a place where she has access, and resources. Like who would have to think about those things other than like sibs, like or people that have disabled sibling, where or loved one in general, right, where you were like, these are things that we have to take into consideration and think about. Is the person that I'm choosing to share life with, are they also like, they probably will never truly understand because they're not a sib unless they are, but like, are they going to also be okay with like bringing in my sister, right? And that's, so there's just so many like layers to that for sure. But yeah, I think, you know I also think personally it affected even like the people that I did choose to date. like like that, like how we were talking about tolerance level and like caretaking role and like stuff like that. Like it really does bleed in so many different areas.
It
Like,
does. It's like a, yeah, it's like you don't want it, but you need it. It's a very, I don't know how to describe that, but it's a very like, it's a very hate love lows situation, I
oh my
feel like.
gosh, it is. And I mean, and not just like with my sister, but like with my brother too, because I mean, I also grew up with different like social workers like coming to our house, or even he got into a lot of trouble growing up. So he was actually sent to a out of state like group home type of thing. uh yeah, so like visiting him there, or like, and I was in grad school when it was happening. So it's just like, those are, again, these are things that um now I can look back and see, oh, that is why I probably have a low heart rate and a high tolerance for like chaos or like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think every time now, like, yeah, after my therapist and I had that conversation about, oh, here's all the things that you actually had to deal with at the same time, and now, like, since that point, I kind of look back and I'm like, huh, I kind of like give myself more credit because clearly, like, and then the other part of the time, I look at my family just in general, and I go, I'm just glad I turned out more normal than they did because it's just so insane. Like all of the things, right? And like they have their own stuff that they got to work through and it's not the same, but I sometimes I just go, the fact that I am a functioning adult right now and I have a stable job and like we right like they kind of you kind of go through like they're which they're quote unquote like normal things, but they're not really for us. It's like that's like what it's almost not goal is not the right word, but it's something that like we crave normalcy.
Yeah, and I think more so like consistency or like
Oh,
reliability,
there
like
we go.
okay, stability.
Yeah, stability. Yeah, there we go. That's the proper. Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
word.
And that's yeah, 100%. I like need stability because like it's life. I mean, in general, life be unpredictable, especially like growing up as a sib, like not knowing what to expect. Like I'm sure for your experience, like well, I don't know when my sister is going to have another like tantrum or outburst or whatever, right? Like even my sister too also deals with her angry outbursts where she could get sometimes violent, and so even like managing on how to take care of her and people around her when that happens, so those are the things that are unpredictable. And I do want to say though, like along the lines of even though we have endured quite a bit and experienced maybe like a atypical life, um I also do think and see and acknowledge like a lot of strengths that come with our experiences, at least with mine. Like, I think my upbringing also taught me like deep empathy for others, like I totally can really empathize deeply with people when they share their experiences with me. And it might not even be anything like related to something that I have gone through, but the feeling I can definitely tap into something that I have personally experienced where I can connect and relate with that. And I think also like I'm okay with people like really like uh what's the word? Like tend not to like judge many people because I know how it feels to be judged. I know how it feels for my family or my sister or my brother to be judged, So it's again like I think those are a lot of wonderful things too that come from growing up as a sib.
Yeah, I mean definitely like the amount of like compassion that we're able to have for people is definitely like higher than just because we learn it so much younger, right? The ability to see something go like, oh, like, they probably just need this. And then, right? And obviously there's like a healthy way to be able to do that as an adult, but that even still is, I think I realized that that's not an ability that everybody has, right? Not everybody can like look inside a room and then understand, understand like situations and things like that. And I think even from like, as much as like we were joking about like the achieving and stuff earlier, like I think the ability to work hard is something that it pays off in a different way now, because I think the ability to work hard just to achieve is one thing, but I think it's paid off in the sense of, we work hard now for ourselves, right? To be able to like go through this healing process, like put in the work to be able to take care of us and our sibs, and I think that's something that if we didn't learn that young, even though like the context is different, I think the principle of saying like, nope, it's hard. Like you just keep doing it, right? Because that's what's going to matter in like the long game. Like that's something that you definitely like. Just that's not an overnight, which I wish it was, because it'd be much less tiring. But
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
but that being said, like it's
Yeah, because I think, I if it wasn't for my sister or my brother, like I wouldn't really, I think, fully or deeply understand the impacts of like how crappy hospital system, medical system is, or even the system that I work for, which is like the mental health system. Like there's so it's so hard for people to get access, and not only that, but like financially too. Like it's there's so many barriers and getting access to things for even like able-bodied people, you know?
yeah, just for like people who have money and like and they don't have extra stuff going on.
Yeah, so and it adds so many more barriers or challenges and layers to people that like are like my family, so like my dad, his well, both of my parents primary language is Spanish. More so my dad. My mom is has learned to speak English a lot quicker, I would say. But even like language wise, like growing up, um I had to sometimes be the translator for my dad, like, so it's like little but big things that I don't think the average person would be aware of or think about unless like you have experienced some kind of like oppression, I guess you could say. Um, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that's something that I like. That's one of the things that we talked about too is like there's stuff that's like big, right? Like you win $1 million, like you get into a car accident, right? You go to war, right? There's all these like very big things that are like alter the way you see the world. But there's also like very small things like what you're describing, right? Like translating for another language, or like, oh, like I just need to get up 30 minutes earlier so I make sure like I get into the bathroom before the rest of my family, or like, oh, like let me finish my meal so that I can do these things, right? Like it's the small stuff like that you don't realize shapes like the way that you just view people and systems and stuff, because because you're like so used to it being that way, and then like the minute you realize like it it doesn't have to be that way, you're like, wait, what's happening? Because it's so like, and that's for the better or for the worse, right? There's some things where it's better not the way you do it, and there's other things where your family does it better than how it exists in the outside. But it's so hard to acclimate, because then you challenge, okay, then, or not even challenge. My default response was, oh, something must be wrong with me, because clearly this isn't aligning the way that I think, instead of what the more, which I don't know, more natural is not the right word, but like the other way to look at it's like, oh no, like the worlds are different, right? But and I don't know if that's a sib thing or a people thing, but I just like, oh, I must have done something wrong too, because it's not working.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a lot of more, I would say, BIPOC folks experience more of the thinking that it's us versus looking at the societal of like in our environments, because and that's what I said earlier, like depending on where you grew up, right? I mean, I grew up in LA, so it's very diverse, and most folks that like my neighbors were Latinx or like brown and black folks, basically, and so I think it wasn't until I moved out of LA into at that time, this was like in the 90s, um, Riverside was very different compared to LA. And at that time, my environment looked completely different. So even if itself was like a culture shock for me, you know? So like, I mean, even then that can produce a lot of like, well, what's wrong with me because I don't look or you know what I mean? But it's there's nothing wrong with us. You know, it's based on like our experiences and external like things that are happening around us. So it's I think it's automatic that we think it's us, right? But it's the systems.
Yeah, which does make me feel better. It makes me feel better. That's just like a regular human problem, not like a not to add to the list of sibs things that we can go. But that, yeah, like yeah, there's a sense of relief that's like okay, like that's just like human. Like yeah, you acclimate to whatever's around you, whether that's because I'm pretty sure, like it'd be interesting, right? If it like if you were in the reverse situation, right, where if you were in Riverside, but then you went to LA, you probably like the
I'd be
same
like,
type of like
wow.
shock would have happened
Yeah, yeah.
regardless, right? Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that is why I always sought out or attempted to seek like other siblings because it can get very lonely, right? And feel like no one understands and whatnot. And it wasn't until I think in the last decade that I even learned about sib shops or whatever, like and then more recently, I started attending a BIPOC sibling support group that meets monthly online. And so that's been really cool and nice because I think it's becoming more and more talked about and more aware of us siblings you know, that we too have been affected and we too matter. So yeah, so it's been an interesting journey thus far.
Yeah, I know. It's like, and there's still more to go. But then, yeah, but it's been it's exciting to see like the increase of sib like awareness and actual facilitated places where sibs can meet each other. And I've told this to other sibs too because my theory is that it's because a lot of us born between sometime in the 80s 90s like whatever, right, and we're all at the age now where we go, okay, this is a problem, what are we going to do? And everyone has different ways of kind of combating that, right? Like I've met like yourself, I've met other therapists. I've met sibs who are like behavioral therapists, and I've met sibs who just like me, like kind of just do other corporate things, but they do this on the side, right? Like it's been so interesting to meet sibs who run sib shops, sibs who just never met other sibs, period, until, like either the podcast or right around kind of within a like yourself, like within a 5 to 10 year time span. And so it's been exciting to see like that it's well, I mean, it sucks that it's an issue, but it's exciting to see that people care about the issue. And I think that's the thing that I didn't know what was going to happen like with the podcast from a standpoint of like I understand it's an issue. The people I've talked to don't necessarily but they're not sibs. And I think the more sibs that I've met, the more I go, okay, I think we're all very aligned on like this is a problem, but like, what do we do? And so I know the podcast isn't going to solve that, but but my thing is like, it's a place for us to talk about why is it an issue, right? And I think a lot of people, well, this is just my personal opinion, but like, it's so hard. You can't really interview a sib to get it unless you're a sib. Cause yeah, and I mean, we kind of talked about that earlier, but I think that's part of the reason why it's because you just can't like if I know you're not a sib and you ask me a question, I'm like, I already like decide to not talk about a large percentage of things that you won't understand, which is everything. That's the core. But yeah, so yeah. So I'm always happy to be more sib because it's fun because we can laugh and cry and laugh about
Yeah.
things that people don't. Yeah,
They
right.
don't
Because
think it's
it's
funny.
funny. Like,
It's like
yeah,
we have to laugh at it, to get through it.
exactly.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I have so many funny stories that people are like, "You did what?" Because like sometimes you just have to like dance in front of your sister when she's having a meltdown, so to like snap her out of it.
Yeah, no, exactly. You pick the favorite song and you like annoy her till. Yeah, no, there's just yeah,
Yeah,
it's
you get
stuff that
creative.
other sibs get. Yeah, exactly. Like I completely understand. Like I've done a multitude of strange things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Well, with that, do you have any encouragement you would like to share with fellow siblings?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is that you are not alone. I know that it can feel very lonely, um, especially when you don't have anyone else that relates to your experience, our experience. But you really aren't alone, and I would hope that you can create your own chosen family, you can create your own community. And I think that's really, really important. That's been super vital in my life. That even though I don't have typical sibling relationships, like I do have my community that are like family to me who are like my siblings. you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Those people are important. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so important. So, so important. And none of them are siblings themselves. However, I've developed a deep connection with all of these people in my life that they can understand to an extent of like where I'm coming from or how that shapes me, and how that plays such a huge role in my life. So anyway, so yes, like you're not alone. You can also like pour into like your chosen family and your people, because that's going to be really, really important throughout your life.
Well, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Charlene.
Thanks for listening to the Special Needs Sibling Podcast. I hope you had a good time listening and feel encouraged in your own journey as a sibling to someone with special needs. If you liked this episode, please share it with your friends. And if you want to hear more stories, please subscribe to the show. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, the show can't happen without you. All special needs siblings have their own unique stories, challenges, family dynamics, and lots of life to talk about and explore. This podcast is here to let you know that you're not alone and that you matter. If you would like to be on the show or just chat off the record, please contact me. My info is in the show notes. Until next time, this is the Special Needs Sibling Podcast.